What if the real horror wasn't the haunted house, but loneliness itself? What if isolation could slowly distort reality, until madness felt safer than society? That's the terrifying world of Shirley Jackson. And in We Have Always Lived in the Castle, she created one of the most psychologically disturbing stories ever written. Shirley Jackson became one of the most influential voices in psychological horror. But unlike traditional horror writers, she rarely focused on monsters. Instead, she explored fear hidden inside ordinary people, families, and society itself. The story centers on the Blackwood sisters, Mary Catherine, also called Merricat, and Constance Blackwood. They live isolated inside a decaying mansion after most of their family died from poisoning years earlier, and the entire village views them with fear and suspicion. This is what makes Jackson's horror unique. Isolation itself becomes terrifying. The Blackwood sisters are physically separated from society, but emotionally, they're trapped inside paranoia, fear, and trauma. The house becomes both sanctuary and prison. Merricat is one of literature's most unsettling narrators. She's strange, superstitious, emotionally unstable, and obsessed with protecting her isolated world. Her perspective slowly reveals a fractured understanding of reality. Jackson explores madness carefully, not as spectacle, but as emotional survival. Merricat uses rituals, magical thinking, and isolation to maintain control over a world she fears deeply. And that psychological complexity makes her terrifying and tragic. Constance represents another side of isolation. After being accused of poisoning her family, she becomes terrified of the outside world. The house becomes her emotional refuge, but safety slowly transforms into imprisonment. Interestingly, the villagers often feel more frightening than the sisters. Their cruelty, judgment, suspicion, mob mentality. Jackson suggests that society itself can become monstrous when driven by fear and prejudice. The Blackwood mansion symbolizes psychological isolation. It's decaying, closed off, frozen in time, just like the sisters themselves. The house reflects the damaged emotional state. One of the novel's biggest questions is, who is truly insane? The isolated sisters, or the hostile society surrounding them? Jackson intentionally blurs the line between sanity and madness, and that ambiguity creates psychological horror far deeper than violence. Most horror stories focus on external threats. Jackson focuses on emotional dread, loneliness, alienation, fear of judgment. Her horror feels disturbingly human. Because Merricat narrates the story, readers constantly question reality itself. What's true? What's distorted? What's hidden? That uncertainty creates constant psychological tension. Jackson's work also explores mental health stigma. The sisters are treated like monsters by society. Their emotional struggles become reasons for exclusion and fear. And the novel critiques how society isolates people who don't fit its expectations. Because isolation remains deeply relevant today. Loneliness, social anxiety, mental health struggles, fear of judgment. These themes still shape modern life. That's why Jackson's work continues to resonate generations later. If you want to write psychological horror like Jackson, focus on atmosphere over gore. Use unreliable narrators. Explore emotional isolation. Let fear come from human behavior. Build tension slowly through psychology. The most terrifying horror often feels emotionally real. At its core, We Have Always Lived in the Castle isn't just about madness. It's about what happens when people are pushed so far outside society. That isolation becomes their entire identity. Shirley Jackson created horror that doesn't rely on monsters. Because she understood something darker. Sometimes, the human mind, and society itself, can become the real source of terror. If you want more deep horror and storytelling breakdowns like this, subscribe. Because the greatest psychological horror stories don't just scare us, they force us to confront ourselves.